friends. We're here to talk about fairy tale stories today. There are stories that have been told for hundreds of years from people all over the world, and a lot of the stories have the same elements in it or the same ideas in it: princes and princesses, kings and places far away. And we know a lot of these stories actually not just from the books that have been written about these stories, but even the movies by Walt Disney over the years. And a lot of times when we think of fairy tales, we think of um, Snow White and Cinderella and a lot of the princessy type stories. But there are a lot of fairy tales that have been handed down or talked about for years and years from one family to the next. Before there were TVs or radio, people would sit around and tell stories at night, and many times they would have the same ideas of rich people, like kings and queens or dukes living in castles. And they were poorer people that told the stories, and it's a way of life that they would hope that they could live. So it was kind of their dreams and, just some fun. So fairy tales are make believe stories from long ago that has been told over and over again. They usually start with once upon a time. Also, there are different elements or parts of a story that make it a fairy tale. The biggest one starting with, it has to be from a long time ago. We could talk about talking animals now like Pete the Cat, but that doesn't make that a fairy tale. Those are new characters today. We could talk about stories that have magic in them, but if it didn't happen a long time ago and if it wasn't a story that was told and retold again and again, it's not a fairy tale. So fairy tales start with once upon a time. They end with happily ever after. They may say it, or at least the story ends happily ever after. Usually there's royalty, a king or a queen, a prince, princess, an archduke, something like that. There are castles and palaces, often in fairy tale stories. Good characters and bad characters, whether they're people or animals. There's good and bad. There's magic. Animals often talk or act like people. There are giants and dwarfs, giants being very big compared to a regular person, or a dwarf, somebody who's very small. And oftentimes the characters that are the most in the story will be groups of 3 or 7, like the 3 little pigs or the 7 dwarfs. So those are the common elements or parts of a fairy tale. My fairy tale story today, of course we've heard so many, and you may have heard this one too, but I like to read Jack and the Beanstalk because many people haven't heard this one as many times as we've heard many of the others that have been made into big movies. So Jack and the Beanstalk is my fairy tale today. Let's watch out for some of those elements, those things that make it a fairy tale. Here we go. Now this is being retold by Katie Danes and illustrated, or the pictures are drawn by Patty Mounter. Of course, a long time ago, these were originally written by somebody called Grimm. It was called Grimm's Fairy Tales. But some people retell them and they add some things, and so it kind of changes the story, but the main ideas are still there. This story is a very short chapter book, so you'll see it says a new chapter each time. I'll read that. So chapter 1, Cow for Sale. Jack was very, very hungry. He searched the house for something to eat, but he didn't find anything, not even a bean. Just a poor boy. Jack and his mother were very poor. They lived alone in a little cottage. The only thing they owned was a cow named Milky White. Ooh. And she was so old, she had run out of milk. "Can't you make yourself useful?" asked Jack's mother, brushing past with a broom. "But there's nothing to do," complained Jack. "Why don't you milk Milky White?" "She has no milk left." Jack's mother stopped sweeping and sat down. "Oh, we have nothing," she sighed. "Nothing to eat, nothing to drink, nothing to sell, nothing." "Except Milky White," Jack pointed out. There was a long pause, followed by a low tummy grumble. "All right," said Jack's mother. "Tomorrow you must take Milky White to market. Get the best price you can. Jack says, easy. So they're going to sell Milky White so they have some money to buy some food and maybe some things, maybe beans, maybe some seeds that they can grow a garden to make more food. That would be helpful. Finally, Jack had a job to do. At the first sign of dawn, he ran outside. Morning, Milky White, he said. We're going to market. Moo, said Milky White. She didn't understand a word. They hadn't gone far when they were met by an old man. What a fine cow, he said. Where are you taking her? To market, replied Jack. Oh, then go no further. I'll buy her. The old man reached deep into his pocket and took out 5 dried beans. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 dried beans. Huh. What's that for? Would you trade 5 beans for a cow? Beans? Said Jack. Magic beans, answered the man. Plant them today, and you'll see a beanstalk reaching to the clouds by morning. Wow, that's amazing, said Jack. And you'll give them to me for old Milky White? Would you make that trade? Do you think Jack's mother thinks this is a good trade? Let's see. The old man nodded. It's a deal, Jack cried. He grabbed the beans, handed over Milky White, and thanked the man and ran off. Chapter 2. The Beanstalk. On the way home, Jack looked closely at the beans. They don't look magic, he thought, frowning. Oh dear, what's Mother going to say? He soon found out. You're back early, called his mother. How much did you get for Milky White? Jack didn't dare answer. Instead, he opened his fist and showed her the beans. What? She's surprised, all right. His mother was furious, super mad. She threw the beans to the ground and sent Jack to his room. Thanks to you, there's no lunch or supper, she yelled. Jack hid under his blanket, feeling foolish. Finally, night came and he fell asleep. When he woke up, his room was still dark, but he could hear birds chattering. Strange, he thought, and he went to the window. A thick curtain of leaves blocked out the sun. He looked close and saw a massive plant reaching up to the sky. Massive, super big. He says, a beanstalk. Mom threw those beans out the window, and look what happened. He raced downstairs and bumped into his mother. Hello, he said, timidly. What have you done to my garden? She screeched. Jack rushed past her. He wanted to climb his beanstalk. The twisted shoots made a good ladder. Soon Jack's house was nothing but a dot, and he was feeling rather dizzy. I'll just climb as far as the clouds, he decided. So here's his house way down here, and he just keeps going and going and going. Chapter 3, Above the Clouds. At last, Jack's hair brushed a soft, fluffy cloud. He climbed a little higher and almost fell off the beanstalk in surprise. There, floating in the distance, was an enormous castle, super big. A delicious smell of sizzling sausages drifted through the air. Oh, with him being so hungry, that must be delicious smelling. Breakfast, thought Jack hungrily. He was clambering onto the cloud when he heard a little voice. Be careful, it said sweetly. Jack saw a tiny figure with wings and a wand. I don't believe in fairies, he thought. He blinked hard, but the fairy was still there. A terrifying giant lives in that castle, warned the fairy. He killed your father. A giant killed my father? Gasped Jack. Didn't your mother tell you? He was a brave man, she said. He was a brave man, she sighed. One day that greedy giant attracted a flock of sheep. Your father rushed to protect them, and the giant ate him. Dun, Just then a whiff of bacon made Jack's nose twitch. I'm going to pay this giant a visit, he told the fairy. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, yes, I am. Jack marched up to the castle. He wanted to feel brave like his dad, but he just felt hungry. Suddenly, the castle door began to open. Jack hid behind a flower pot. A giant woman appeared carrying a giant watering can. Then, a giant drop of water splashed on Jack's head and drenched him. Drenched him. Pah! Help! He gargled. Oh, sorry, dearie, said the giant woman. I didn't see you. Come inside and dry off. She plucked Jack from the ground, sat him on the palm of her hand, and sailed him through the vast castle corridors. Corridors is another way to say hallway. Chapter 4, Fee, Fi, Fo, Fum. In no time, Jack was sitting on the kitchen table. One sausage or two? Asked the giant woman. Jack gulped each sausage. Each sausage was as long as him. Half, please, he answered. He was smearing butter on his third toast crumb when he heard a thunderous roar. Oh, no, cried the giant woman. That's my husband. If he sees you, dearie, you'll be breakfast. Turn the light a little bit more. She hid Jack in an empty teapot. Heavy footsteps shook the room. Fee, fi, fo, fum, bellowed the rumbling voice. I smell the blood of a little man. Hungry, are you, Gerald? Jack slowly lifted the teapot lid. A giant was stomping around the kitchen, sniffing the air greedily. That monster killed my father, thought Jack, terrified. But be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread, the giant boomed. I'm sure you will, dear, replied the giant's wife, but eat your breakfast first. The giant soon forgot Jack's smell. He guzzled down every mouthful, then licked his plate clean. Bring me my hen, he ordered his wife. She placed the little hen on his hand. Jack watched as it clucked, flapped its feathers, and laid a shiny golden egg. Another, growled the giant, and another. Eggs piled up on his hand, glinting in the morning light. The giant looked very pleased with himself. Then he yawned. He rested his chin on the table and nodded off, fell asleep. Time to escape, thought Jack. He clambered out of the teapot and dropped down just by the giant's hand. The little hen stood trembling by her golden eggs. You're coming too. Jack grabbed the hen, slid down the tablecloth, and raced through a crack under the door. A giant dog barked loudly, but Jack kept running. He heard the giant's angry roar and ran even faster. At last, the beanstalk was in sight. Jack flung himself at it and scrambled down to safety. Whew. Chapter 5, Another Adventure. When Jack's mother saw the hen, she licked her lips. Chicken for dinner, she said. No way, cried Jack. This hen lays golden eggs. She'll make us rich. Of all the silly stories, Jack's mother began. Just then the hen clucked, flapped her feathers, and laid a golden egg. It's true! We're rich! An egg a week brought Jack and his mother all they needed. Life was very comfortable, but also a little dull. Boring, dull. One morning, Jack was lying in the shade of the beanstalk when the smell of sizzling sausages wafted by. Smell. He looked at the beanstalk towering above, then he looked at the giant's magic hen. Maybe the giant has other treasures, thought Jack. I think it's time for another adventure. He has the golden hen and he can buy anything he wants. Look how fancy they are now. Do you think it's a good idea for him to go get more treasure? Sometimes we call that greedy. If you want more than you really need and it's not yours anyway. The beanstalk seemed much higher than before. When Jack touched the clouds, he was already puffing and panting. He followed the smell of sausages to the castle kitchen and crept under the door. The giant's wife was whistling by the stove. Please, Miss Giant, called Jack politely, do you have half a sausage to spare? Go away, she said. The last boy stole my husband's hen. Gerald is still in a terrible temper. If he finds you here, he'll gobble you up. Oh, said Jack, turning to leave. Sorry to bother you. Wait, she said kindly. I'm sure I could find you something. Jack was munching on a fried mushroom when a giant voice echoed around the room. Fee-fi-fo-fum. Jack dived into the sugar. I smell the blood of a little man, boomed the giant. You're imagining things, Gerald, replied his wife. I'll fetch you your harp. That will calm you. As the angry giant sniffed around the room, his wife placed a tiny golden harp on the table. It played soft, soothing tunes, all on its own. The giant sat down, closed his eyes, and began to snore. Quick, go, whispered his wife to the sugar bowl. Jack leaped out. Seeing the beautiful harp, he tucked it under his arm and ran away quick. Did he really need to take the harp? The music stopped and the giant woke up. My harp, he cried. Seconds later, he was pounding after Jack. I'll grind your bones, you little thief. Quick, he's behind us. As Jack hurried down the beanstalk, it began to sway. Woo, moving, swaying. The giant was climbing down too. Fetch Dad's saw, Jack yelled to his mother. Jumping to the ground, Jack grabbed the saw. He pulled back and forth across the thick beanstalk. Suddenly there was a massive creak, and the whole beanstalk toppled to the ground, flinging the giant over the distant hills. No one ever saw him again. With a hen that laid golden eggs and a beautiful singing harp, Jack and his mother lived very happily. But sometimes Jack found himself gazing at the beanstalk stump, wishing that it would grow once more. And there is the end of the story. So, let's see. Did we have Once Upon a Time? Yep. Did it end happily? It didn't say happily ever after, but it did end happily, I guess, for Jack, not so much the giant. There was a palace. There weren't kings and queens, but there was a palace or a castle, right, that the giant was in. There were good people and bad people. There was magic hen, magic harp, magic beans. I guess no animals talking. Three main characters, even though the mother was, or let's go through this one first. Giant, right? Instead of a dwarf, there was a giant. And there were three main characters. There were a couple others. There was the mother and the wife, but mostly, or there was the mother as the secondary character, but there was Jack and the wife and the giant that were the three biggest main characters, like the Three Little Pigs. So groups of three. So I hope you enjoyed that story, a fairy tale from long ago. You may read it from somebody else retelling it, and it may have different details. So check it out. If you see another Jack and the Beanstalk story, pick it up and read it and see how they compare. Hope you enjoyed that. Talk to you soon. Bye. Keep reading.